Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast. Here is Derek Thomas.
It's Groundhog Day!
Groundhog time.
1,000 people freezing their butts off waiting to worship a rat.
Weatherman Phil Connors is spending the day in Puxatawney, Pennsylvania.
Phil? Ned Ryerson. I did the whistling belly button trick at the high school talent show.
Bing!
Bang!
But Phil's about to find out he's not just stuck in Puxatawney.
Will you be checking out today, Mr. Connors?
Chance of departure today, 100%.
He's stuck
It's Groundhog Day!
in Groundhog Day.
I'm reliving the same day over and over.
Phil?
Ned Ryerson?
Bang!
Do you ever have deja vu, Mrs. Lancaster?
I don't think so, but I could check with the kitchen.
Well, it's Groundhog Day. Again?
At first, he was a little anxious.
Phil? What?
Will you be checking out today, Mr. Connors?
I'd say the chance of departure is 80%.
But now,
We could do whatever we want.
he's discovering the possibilities
Don't you worry about cholesterol?
Why?
and living life like there's no tomorrow.
Phil Connors!
Ned!
Because there isn't.
I am an immortal. I have been stabbed, shot, burned, frozen, electrocuted. I'm a god.
You're God.
I'm a god. I'm not the god.
He's out of his gourd.
But to get what his heart wants most
What are you looking for, Phil? A date for the weekend?
means living this day over again till he gets it right.
Believe it or not, I studied 19th century French poetry.
What a waste of time.
I studied 19th century French poetry.
La fille qui j'aimerais.
You speak French.
Oui.
Bill Murray, Andy McDowell,
To the groundhog.
I always drink to world peace. But what should we drink to?
I like to say a prayer and drink to world peace. Don't drive angry. Don't drive angry.
He might be okay.
Yes! Groundhog Day!
Life has a funny way of repeating itself.
What did you do today?
Oh, same old, same old.
Welcome to Monday Morning Critic Podcast, episode 215. I am Derek Thomas. Thank you so much for listening today. That was a trailer from the 1993 movie Groundhog Day. On IMDb, Groundhog Day has an 8.0 with almost 600,000 votes. And I know I've said this before when it comes to comedies, but an 8.0 is legitimately unbelievable for a comedy. It is a score that is, most comedies, the ones, and I say this during the interview, I've said it before, the ones that we quote every day in pop culture, in our social lives, the famous lines, all those great movies are 6s and maybe 7s, and if you're really lucky, high 7s. They never reach 8.0. Groundhog Day is certainly a little bit more rare because it does have a little more dramatic effect. I think it's not that other comedies aren't deep, but it's a comedy for the most part. It's a comedy at heart, and 8.0 is just a phenomenal score. And the reason I play it is today's guest played Ned Ryerson, classic character. His name is Stephen Tobolowsky, and Stephen is maybe one of the most underrated actors on the planet. And I've said that before, but legitimately, this could be the most underrated guest I've ever had. His knack and ability for storytelling is just truly unbelievable. I'll just read you off his filmography here, just part of it. In the Goldbergs, he plays Principal Bell. He was in Wild Hogs, one of the more underrated comedies, in my opinion, in the last 20 years. He plays Charlie in Wild Hogs. He was in Deadwood. He was in Momento, the Christopher Nolan-directed movie, as Sammy Jenkins. He was in The Insider. He was in The Glimmer Man. And if you can find it on YouTube, he tells one of the funniest stories about Steven Seagal and his experience with him on set. It's legitimately one of the funniest stories I've ever heard. If you could find Steven's story about Steven Seagal and The Glimmer Man, I highly recommend it. Obviously, Groundhog Day, Hero, Basic Instinct, Thelma and Louise, Mississippi Burning, big part in that movie, Spaceballs, on and on. His podcast, The Tobolowsky Files, I just started listening to it. There's not many podcasts I listen to. There's a few out there. His is one that I've just started listening to. I can't tell you how much I loved it. I asked Steven to be a guest for a number of credits in his filmography, Spaceballs being one, Groundhog Day being one, his ability to storytell. I mean, his stories are fun. Just go on YouTube and just Google his name, Steven Tobolowsky, and his stories are endless, and they're never boring. Like, they keep you on the edge of their seat. And you'll see in this interview, he goes into a lot of that, and it's just, they're not just like wacky, wild stories. They're informative. They have heart. It's just the way everything about Steven I love. I love this interview. I loved everything he had to say. But again, really talented guest. If you haven't yet, his podcast is called The Tobolowsky Files. His filmography is very lengthy. A show that I started watching shortly after our interview. I think I've seen an episode before on Netflix. But the One Day at a Time remake, again, another comedy that, even though it's a series, I think it's like 8.3. And they canceled it after 4 seasons. I was a little disappointed. I started watching. I'm like hooked on it now. He mentions that too. They canceled it. That's unfortunate. It's called One Day at a Time. It is a remake of I think it was the late 70s, early 80s, One Day at a Time. But very well done. This is one of those interviews I really, truly enjoyed. So this interview is about an hour and a half, 90 minutes. I'm telling you, you'll love every second. I'm telling you, it's not one of those ones that drag out, right? I'm really proud of this. Not that I'm not proud of the others, but I'm super proud of this interview. If you're going for a ride somewhere or exercising, I think you'll like everything he has to say. We talk about religion, movies, TV. We talk about everything, and he's so damn likable. He's one of those people. I could talk to him forever. And he's just one of those guys. But I'll wrap this up quickly and get you right to that interview. Just a few things. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it is MDM Critic. If you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Monday Morning Critic Podcast or Monday Morning Critic. On Facebook, Monday Morning Critic Podcast. I would love if you followed or liked there. That would be awesome. My website is mmcpodcast.com. My email is mondaymorningcritic@gmail.com. Getting some really nice notes from people. Also getting some spam and solicitation for me if I want to buy more, if I want to get my podcast out there more, if I want to get my website out there more, if I want to buy more followers, if I want to buy more. It's like, I'm not that podcast. I'm not that follow for follow podcast that everyone else does. That's not me. I feel like if my content can't stand on its own, then please don't listen to me. Don't follow. Don't make me unlistenable. Then that's fine. But if you are listening and you've returned, that's a good thing for me, and that's my satisfaction. That's why I do this. But yeah, giving my email out has been definitely a mixed bag because I get some wonderful notes and I get some spam, and it's like, no, I don't want to buy followers. I don't want to buy anything, If people come to my podcast and they download it and they listen to it, it's because they love the product. And that's what I want to stand on its own, not these follow for follow kind of deals. That's just not me. I recommended Steven's podcast, The Tobolowsky Files, because I've listened to it. It's a great podcast. That's why I'm recommending it. He's not following me. He hasn't liked any of my posts. I do it because I think you would love it. I talk about Joe Rogan on occasion because I think you will love his podcast. I would bring up something that I like, my movies I talk about, because I think you love them. That's why I would bring it out. So that being said, if you are listening on YouTube, because I've lost. I don't look, but I mentioned this before too. They calculate your listens. And I've lost probably in the history of the podcast, probably both, and I've said this before too, 35, 40,000 listens because they don't count YouTube. So if you're listening on YouTube, I would so love if you listen to one of these formats, and I'll be quick about this. Audible has an app that's great, and they're all free, by the way. Apple Podcasts would be great if you want to leave a review there. That would be awesome. Stitcher, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, they all work great. I mean, if YouTube is easiest for you, great. But if you can use one of those other methods, that would be awesome, because I do believe it goes to the final count, which matters in a few ways. Nothing important, nothing that's life-changing for me, but if you could do it another way, that would be great. And one last thing before I get you over to the interview, movie-related. So one of the best movies I've seen in the last 5 years, without question, is The Way Back with Ben Affleck, who plays a basketball coach with an alcohol problem. It was my movie of the year. I was saying 2019 because I swear it came out in late 2019. It came out early 2020. The last two movies I saw before the pandemic hit originally was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. I think that was 2019. And then shortly after the new year dropped in 2020 was The Way Back. And that's the movie, for me, that is the movie of the year for 2020. And Ben Affleck, I am really cheering for him to get an Academy Award. He certainly deserves a nomination. I'm certainly cheering for him to win. There's lots of memes about him. I don't get it. Like, the guy has gone through a lot in his personal life, and people are like crucifying him because of his back tattoo, because he's got these photographs with these memes where he's dropping Dunkin' Donuts. It's like, I don't get the picking on Ben Affleck thing. I don't get it. Like, I have a great sense of humor, I like to think, but I don't get the picking on Ben Affleck, in memes. And, there's one where he's like his eyes are closed and he's clearly disgusted, or he's having a cigarette. And I don't see Ben Affleck as a target. To me, he seems like one of the more talented people in Hollywood. So I don't, for me anyway, he's in my top 5 to 10 actors for sure. But I don't find the hilarity when it comes to poking fun at Ben Affleck. I guess that's part of the Twitter cesspool extending itself into other forms on the internet. But I don't get it. The man is supremely talented, and I cannot recommend enough The Way Back, 2020 release. Gavin O'Connor directed. I was fortunate enough to have a few guests from the movie on the show. Will Ropp, who plays Kenny Dawes, huge role in the movie. Cinematographer Edu Grau on the show. So very excited, very fortunate to have a lot of these people on the show. And easily my movie of the year for 2020, The Way Back. It moved me like no other. I would have to definitely also say, though, Sound of Metal, a very, very, very close second. This is episode 215. I bring to you the very first interview of 2021, Stephen Tobolowsky. My next guest is an actor, author, musician, podcaster, The Tobolowsky Files. His filmography includes classics like Momento, Groundhog Day, Spaceballs. Please welcome the very talented Stephen Tobolowsky. Stephen, I am so happy to have you here today.
And it's a pleasure to be here in the new year.
Yes, you are the first interview of 2021, and I could not have started it off with a better human being, so thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I'll be alive in 2021, in the future of 2021.
So I listen to a lot of the interviews you've done. You're very kind with your time when it comes to giving it to others for interviews and just sitting down and talking with people. You're very generous in that way. I'm trying to figure out the early part of your life. I heard an interview you did. It was a funny thing where you were talking to the newscaster about, because you're from a Jewish family, I believe, opening Christmas presents under the dining room table, which I could not stop laughing at. But the whole story is just great. Are you Polish, Russian, Jewish? I'm trying to put that together, Stephen. Talk to me about your makeup and how it all kind of folds. We were talking a little about your name too. How does that kind of come together?
Yeah, it's like good luck, bad luck, isn't it? A lot of times the things in our lives that we think is the worst luck possible, like my grandfather feeling he had to leave Poland. I believe he was in southern Poland, but I'll talk about that in a second, because he was going to marry a woman who had left for the United States. And so he left in like 1884. And he missed the Holocaust. There was a story that was told in our family that grandfather and this is the joke we had talked about before, how to pronounce my name.
Right.
For those who have heard it, it's quick. It's a quick version, but I asked my uncle Nathan, who's the family historian, how you pronounce our name when I was in my 50s.
Wow.
Because I noticed people in our family pronounce the name differently. Tobolowsky, 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 different ways. And my uncle Nathan said you could pronounce it any way you want because it's not really your name. And I went, what? What? Yeah. When grandfather came to the United States, he came through Galveston, Texas, not Ellis Island. Grandfather did not speak English. And the fellow at Galveston did not understand whatever grandfather was speaking. So when the man said, "Who are you?" grandfather didn't know who. The only who he knew was the German word wo, which means where. So he thought the man was asking, "Where are you from?" And so grandfather, in his, I guess, Polish-Russian way, said he was Abraham from Tobolowsky. Now, Tobolowsky is in Russia, but my family came from Poland, so you figure that one out. So the man in Galveston stamped grandfather Abraham's little name thing as "You are now Abraham Tobolowsky," so I got my name the same way Don Corleone did in The Godfather.
That is great.
And I have no idea, really, but the story Uncle Nathan tells is that grandfather Tobolowsky rode into Texas on a horse looking for his beloved, whom he married and proceeded to have like 10 children with, increasing the Jewish population in Dallas manyfold, I'm sure. And the only thing I remember about grandfather growing up is he never really spoke much English, but he loved wrestling. He loved watching wrestling on TV. And always after Sunday school, I would come over, the family would go over to see grandfather and grandmother and all the aunts and uncles. And everyone would be sitting around the TV watching a rerun of a Saturday Night Wrestling, which they showed on Dallas TV Sunday morning. And grandfather would be yelling and screaming at the television that it was unfair what the man, was unfair. He was cheating. He was cheating. So grandfather had a real sense of reality. He knew the good from the bad, but he couldn't tell the fake wrestler from the real wrestler.
That's great. And fun fact, I had Ivan Putski, the Polish Hammer, on the show a couple of years back.
Oh, so man.
Yeah.
I touched the hem of your garment.
So the reason I ask about your background is, one, because I'm curious, but two, is because I'm half Polish. My mother grew up in Poland, so I find it very interesting when you talk about your grandfather. And he sounds like just this great kind of larger-than-life guy, Stephen.
Well, he was a peddler. And, I mean, can you imagine a world in which someone in your family has a horse they keep in the backyard and the city doesn't mind, and the horse's name, I believe, was Bessie, and he would hitch up Bessie to a wagon, and he rode like a circuit from Dallas to Denton to Fort Worth and around and back again, and it would take him a couple of weeks. He was an Orthodox Jew, so on the Sabbath, he would have to have kosher food to eat in his wagon. I mean, I can't even comprehend a world where that happened. But that was my grandfather, and doing that, my grandfather put how many kids through law school? How many kids through medical school? My goodness. I know 2 through medical school. I'm thinking 1, 2 law school. 1 became a CPA. 1, I mean, I cannot believe these children grew up with my grandfather being a peddler. Wow. It's remarkable. That world is gone. There is something in the Talmud, and if your listeners don't know what the Talmud is, in Judaism, there's the Torah, right? That's the Bible. That's the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. That's that part. That's the Torah.
Right.
And then nobody could really define what exactly was being said in the Torah. So for hundreds of years, these rabbis argued with one another as to what was really being said and what it really meant. And that became the 72 volumes of the Talmud, sort of put together between, I want to say, maybe 300 BCE to 300 AD, around that period of time.
Right.
There is a discussion in there that when I started looking at the Talmud, I thought, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. And now that it's been several years, I go like, oh, my God, it's so true. And that is the blessing of 2 generations. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
Okay. So in the Talmud, it said the important thing for an idea to survive is for it to survive 2 generations, because that is the length of time it takes for an idea to become part of culture, to become part of history. So the greatest lessons taught are the lessons a grandfather teaches a grandchild. Because those will be the most profound lessons. I take a look now at my grandfather, the lesson of 2 generations. Work hard, save your money, don't be frivolous, and give cookies to your grandchildren all the time. But that world where grandfather lived totally doesn't exist anymore, unless it exists somewhere in the steppes of the Eurasian mountains, whatever. They don't exist anymore, and that lesson of 2 generations is gone.
Oh, that's beautiful. And Stephen, let me ask you, my wife is Jewish. Our daughter will be raised Jewish. I am not Jewish. But you mentioned that your grandfather was Orthodox. They're very strict about how they approach, their way of life, right? It's a little more. I don't think I have the right verbiage here, but it's when it comes to Judaism, it's the most strict. Is that a good way of saying it? I feel like it's very
it's the most strict, and probably and there are various levels of strict depending on if you're New Orthodox or old world Orthodox, or the guys in the black hats. I don't know if they certainly you see them on the Sabbath walking to the synagogue. So if you're strictly Orthodox, you use no electronic devices on the Sabbath, and you don't light a fire, and there's something like, I want to say 39 prohibitions for the Sabbath, and you follow all those 39 things you do not do. And one thing you are supposed to do, and you are commanded to do, is to make love to your husband or wife. That is one of the things you're supposed to do on the Sabbath. You are commanded to do. And there is a beautiful prayer, and I think it is, the numbers are just slipping in, and I'm like the 31st proverb, I'm thinking, where you hold your wife's You hold your wife's face in your hands, and you recite the Woman of Valor to her on Sabbath evening after Sabbath dinner. And then you knock it out. You make love. And I'm thinking, there is, I remember with Ann, my wife Ann, she was not Jewish. She was Episcopal Baptist witch. I'm not sure what she was, but her father was Baptist because he played golf in Georgia, and all of his friends, golfing buddies, were in the Baptist church. Mother was Episcopal. And I remember once I visited Ann for like midnight mass and at the Episcopal church, and that sermon went wrong very quickly. It was amazing. And I was sitting there thinking like, okay, I'm being a good guy sitting here with Ann watching this Episcopal midnight mass. I have no idea where this is going to go. So the minister, the priest, I don't know what they call in the Episcopal church, he came out and he began his sermon, God hates us. And I went like, wait, what? Hold it. I waited to midnight on Christmas to hear this. God must really, and then I realized he kind of overstated his passion. He realized he had gone a bridge too far. And he started trying to walk it back. What I mean is, and he started trying to walk it back. I will go, this is one of the most amazing sermons I've ever heard. Christmas Eve, midnight. This one probably the most important sermon of the year. And what he was trying to say is talk about human hypocrisy. which is an easy place to go, especially Christmas time when everyone is filled with good cheer and tidings, blessed tidings for everybody until the day after Christmas. It was amazing. But Anne shocked me once, terrified me. I get very busy in show business, and I end up working a lot at times. Sometimes I'm unemployed, like now in the pandemic, but working on different shows. So Anne is at home alone, and she said she wanted to take an evening course. Would I mind if she took an evening class? I go, no, not. And I didn't ask her what the damn class was. And I go, like, it's my fault. I should ask her. But I didn't. And like 4 months later, Anne comes down the stairs and said, this morning I'm converting to Judaism.
Wow.
That was the class I was attending. I did not want to tell you what the class was because I didn't want your opinion to sway me one way or another. This was my decision. This was something I wanted to do because of your mother. The way your mother lived and the way your mother loved made me want to be a part of that life and have a stake of that and share that with you. And I started bawling.
Wow.
I mean, I was in tears in the kitchen, and she said, today I have to be questioned by the 3 oldest rabbis in the world as to all my if I pass my final exam. And then after that, I have to take the mikvah, which is this ritual bath, which is a very Orthodox thing to do, where you take off everything, even wetting everything. You take off everything, and the water cannot come from, it has to come from a natural source, not the pipes. It has to be kosher water. So a lot of times what they do is for the mikvah is they get snow from the mountain. And they bring it into Los Angeles and put the snow in the mikvah, and it melts and it becomes this pure spring that you bathe in, and then you don't, no one witnesses. Anne has a woman who gets into the water with her, and Anne kind of goes underwater 3 times saying a prayer and whatever, and bing, bang, boom, you become a Jew. And then she came home and said, okay, all this has to get out of the house. It's not kosher. Now you got to change this. Now you got to do that. And it goes back to the old Jewish joke, never marry a shiksa, because they become more Jewish than anybody else. So when Anne became Jewish, our home became kind of what we call quasi-kosher. We stopped eating shrimp and shellfish. We didn't mix meat with milk, and we started following a lot of the kosher rules and started making fresh challah for Shabbat. And one of those Shabbats, I grabbed Anne's face, took her upstairs, and tried to do the Woman of Valor prayer. Let me tell you, hard to get through. It works better than Sade. I got to tell you, it is so gorgeous. I recommend it to all of you, the Woman of Valor prayer. If you're having trouble with your wife or girlfriend, try that one out, friends.
That is beautiful. I've been dying to ask you this. That is such an awesome story. Was it tough, do you think, for your grandfather and maybe you as well, growing up, to be Jewish and Polish and Russian in Dallas at that time? Even you growing up, your grandfather, were there a lot of difficulties associated with that?
Oh, God, yes. It, again, lesson of 2 generations. Where I grew up in Oak Cliff, Dallas, it was different from a world that you could possibly imagine. There were more Nazis in Oak Cliff than there were Jews. There were only 3 Jewish families. And by Nazis, I don't mean Nazis the way we toss it around these days, where everybody you disagree with is a Nazi. Or this or that, they're a Nazi. No. These people took Stormtrooper magazine. I remember I was in 6th grade, 7th grade basketball team. And we had the worst basketball team in our 6th and 7th grade. I think it was 7th. And you could have picked any of those years, 5th, 6th, 7th. We had the worst basketball team in the city. But afterwards, we would go to one kid's house or another to celebrate whatever defeat that was, however ignominious it was. So we went over to John Rutledge's house, who was our guard, who was one of the few people on our team that had real talent. John, he rarely missed. He was a great shot. He was short, but he was a great shot. So we're all laughing and joking about how terrible our game was. And we go over to John's house to have pimento cheese sandwiches. And we walk in, and in the living room, there is a German flag on the wall with a bust of Adolf Hitler.
Wow.
I'm talking guys and gals. This is the 1960s. The Beatles had started singing, and they had a bust of Adolf Hitler. They didn't figure out that worldview didn't come to much good. On his, they had a magazine kind of table in front of the fireplace with Stormtrooper magazine, and if you haven't seen that magazine, it'll give you nightmares if you look at that magazine. And I remember going, wow. So this is kind of a good news, bad news situation. It's kind of bad news that John and his family, I guess, are Nazis. But kind of the good news is that they're not afraid they don't feel the need to clean up after they've had a Bund rally. They're completely comfortable in their skin with having this bust of Hitler for all their friends. So yes, nobody knew I was Jewish. They thought with Tobolowsky I could be Catholic, and Catholics were hated for sure in Oak Cliff, but not as much as Jews. When they found out I was Jewish, oh my God. I remember John Rutledge stabbed me with a pencil going up the stairs.
What?
I mean, it drew blood. Like he was behind me on the stairs. He stabbed me with a pencil. I remember Neil, another one of the Nazi boys at our school, pushed me down a flight of stairs. It was amazing the amount of hatred. And I was good old Tobo. I was good old buddy. I was their buddy until they found out I was Jewish. And then it was terrifying. But in a way, what we began the conversation, good news, bad news, with, grandfather having to leave his homeland when he was a young man, but he ended up missing the Holocaust. In a way, the fact that I wasn't accepted as a young person in school, in our sports teams or wherever I was, probably is one of the prime ingredients that led me to becoming an actor, which was really no man's land for Oak Cliff. Nobody was an actor in Oak Cliff.
That is frightening. And you talk about 6th grade. I believe, just from things I was reading, that's the grade I believe you started to receive awards for your unbelievable storytelling abilities, right? Was it that grade? 6th grade was one of them, Stephen, right?
Yeah, 6th grade, I won Best Storyteller of our school for telling the story of the ghost ship. And it's really a fantastic story. Very briefly, I'll thrill you with the story of the ghost ship. Is they found this ship floating around the ocean with no one on it, but it had all the trappings of people, and they had no idea what happened to everybody on board. And it took archaeologists years later to realize that there was a river that went under the Sahara Desert that gets blocked the subterranean river gets blocked with sand. And every few generations, this sand is blown out by the water pressure and floats up into the Atlantic Ocean and becomes this mysterious island that exists for a short period of time. And it lifted this ship out of the water, and the people climbed out and made it to the coastline of Africa, and to whatever happened to them after that, who knows. But then eventually the sand dissipated and the ship went sailing off with no crew or people aboard. It became the ghost ship. So I told that story in 6th grade and mesmerized my audience. But again, this was just a story I had read in one of our weekly readers and just was taken with it, just loved it. But that's when I really kind of started telling stories.
Yeah, and that's got to play. I mean, I'm skipping around a little bit because I have 2 more questions about you growing up, but that's got to be a big connection to who you are today. The ability to actors are always storytellers, I believe, but your ability. I mean, I've heard you talking now for 20, 25 minutes. The way you speak, your storytelling ability, I have to tell you, Steve, it's truly second to none.
It's funny. This year's podcasts kind of are based on a Carl Jung idea that who we are and what we are may come from generations before us, the 2 generations thing, maybe even further back, and we may not be aware of what our lineage is. And I remember Deborah Tobolowsky, my brother's daughter. She is very much a family historian. She had some pictures of people from the old country. And I remember one time when Deborah was, I think I want to say maybe about 15 years ago. So she had some old pictures from the people of the old country. And she pointed out this one guy with a beard sitting around the fire in Russia and said, this man was considered the storyteller of his town. And I went like, oh, wow. And it made me wonder the Jungian idea. I wonder if there is that strain of storytelling that goes back to that time in Russia or Poland, wherever grandfather came from, before his generation.
Yeah, that's well said. And you're a graduate, for those listening, of Justin F. Kimball High School. You go on to Southern Methodist. Any temptation on your part, Stephen, to say, just get me out of Texas? Is there any temptation on your part at that point of your life?
I loved Texas. I loved everything about Texas. I think it was in Texas I first heard Willie Nelson. First heard Willie when I was, I may have gone to California. I may have gone to California and came back, but it was in Texas at Fort Worth I first heard this man sing. And it was in Fort Worth. And I had never seen him live, and he started singing Whiskey River and Hand on the Wheel and a few of his songs. And I realized, sitting up in the second balcony of the Fort Worth arena, my face was wet. And I looked, and I had been crying the whole time listening to him sing. He had such a profound effect on me. And Willie said something at that concert that I went like, yep, that's true. And he said, I love Texas, and I love everything about Texas because it seems to have no limit. And people who are from Texas see nothing but potential when they see a horizon. They see land that never ends. And I thought, that's the way I felt growing up. I felt like Texas was a kingdom. And it was a kingdom filled with wonder for me because I kind of grew up in the wilds, in the woods, and I spent so much of my time in the woods with wild friends. It was idyllic growing up in Texas. So I have nothing but good thoughts about Texas. The only reason I wanted to leave was that we had a teacher at SMU who said, if you want to be a professional actor, you only have 2 choices. You have to go to New York or you have to go to LA. And those are the only 2 choices you have. So that's the only reason why I felt I had to leave Texas.
Yeah, and I was just thinking of what you went through growing up in that one scenario. But yeah, it does sound like you're absolutely enamored with Texas. And I wanted to ask you brought up Willie Nelson. Just this is a completely random question or comment, I should say. His version of Always on My Mind absolutely blows away Elvis's, my opinion only. I don't even think it's close, but that's just me.
It's so funny. That song, I remember I heard him introduce that song at after I started listening to Willie's concerts. I'd go whenever I could, and he introduced that song at one of those concerts. Mike Royce, one of our head writers on our recently demised series, One Day at a Time, was talking about that song, One Day at a Time. Always on My Mind. And Mike was saying, like, is this guy in this song a sociopath? I mean, I'm just wondering. Maybe I should have loved you more than I, he really is dissing this girl the entire song. But of course, the way Willie sings the song, you realize, you feel the problem was the inability of the man to really have loved the woman appropriately. Whereas when Elvis sings the song, he was just too damn cool. He's too busy. He's got too many chicks waiting in line. So it was a real different approach with Elvis and Willie.
Yeah, that is really well said. And, I have to say, oftentimes the term character actor pops up when I look at your life. I hate that term because I almost feel like I don't want to say minimalizes somebody, but I just feel like, isn't every actor, and I know what character actor means, but isn't every actor portraying a character? Like, I don't know, I just feel like it's just such an unnecessary term, I feel like. Am I overreacting to that?
Well, I think, a lot of things with acting and professional acting are intended to diss the performer. So, I'm used, yes, the idea of character actor. I think Larry Miller, comedian, actor, writer, said it best. He said, the definition of a character actor means you will never kiss Renee Zellweger. Never. So that is really the definition. You're not going to get the girl. And that's just who we are. And I've loved being a character actor. If you are the lead in a film, like you take a look at someone like Chevy Chase, who was always a very funny guy and kind of an offbeat guy, but he was the lead in these films. It was always nerve-wracking for him as to whether the films made money opening week, because it could be the end of his career. But Chevy Chase always needed a friend or a boss or a doctor. Whether his career was going up or down, they always need the character actor, because we're kind of the glue that holds the story together. So I've had the opportunity to play many, many, many more varied types of roles as an actor in film and in television. Of course, in theater, the term character actor does not exist, right?
Right.
In theater, you are just an actor. You're just doing your job. It's only in television and film, it means you're kind of a secondary role, and you have kind of I always told this joke that it's important in a script. When I read a script, a film, TV role, it's important to see if I have a name. In plays, all the characters have full names. And they even have like Uncle Vanya. I mean, he's got a whole name, and he's somebody's uncle. You know everything about that guy from. But in movies and television shows, quite often I do not get a full name, and that is kind of the domain of the character actor. And I came up with this kind of scientific theory that's proven to be kind of true, and that is in scripts in which I get my occupation and a first name, like Sheriff Charlie, Ringmaster Bob, in a script, that means I'm probably in a comedy. If I get my profession and a last name, Detective Johnson, Principal Howard. I'm probably going to be in a drama. So I came up with this. Now, I have played parts. Let me see. I played, here's a question for you. Okay. In room 222, I played Homeless Man 2. I played Homeless Man number 2. There were 3 homeless people. Which role do you think is the best role between Homeless Man 1, Homeless Man 2, and Homeless Man 3?
I think would 1 be the best, I guess, right?
You are so wrong. So see, this is the way I can school the audience, is when you're Homeless Man 1, you are the straight up homeless guy. You are the homeless guy that probably didn't deserve to be homeless, had a job before. He's the one who's got his wits about him. He's he knows the ropes of being homeless. But when you're Homeless Man 2, you're the funny homeless guy. You're the homeless guy that's a little wacky. You're the homeless guy that's got an edge to him. Homeless Man 2 is much better than Homeless Man 1. And Homeless Man 3 is a woman. Homeless woman. But they call her Homeless Man 3, but she was a woman. In fact, when I did Room 222, I was so happy to have the role of Homeless Man 2. I remember I told my mom and dad, believe me, Mom, you want to be Homeless Man 2, not Homeless Man 1. Then I got good roles in the future, Groundhog Day, and I was playing Ned Ryerson, and I was in Woodstock, Illinois, and there's the scene where the ladies get the flat tire, and Bill Murray goes and really every morning fixes their flat tire, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
The woman in the car who sticks her head out and goes, "Oh, the fastest jack in town," that woman was Homeless Man 3.
Wow.
Homeless Man 3. She had had enough of Los Angeles and moved to Chicago after we did Room 222. And one of the first jobs she got was when Groundhog Day came and they cast a lot of the smaller roles from Chicago. So I got to reunite with Homeless Man 3, when we did Groundhog Day.
What a small world. How awesome is that? That is
It's completely awesome.
I want to get into your filmography right now, but I have to say one of the ones that nobody ever brings up, and I can't say that I remember it. I definitely remember the show. How great of a show was Alice? I got to tell you, from everything to Kiss My Grits to everything on Steven, one of my favorite shows of all time.
Alice was a terrific show. First of all, it came from it was one, I want to say in my life, it was one of the first successful movies that they decided to translate into a television show, right? It came from Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which Martin Scorsese directed, which was, I believe, the introduction of a young man named Harvey Keitel. But that was a fantastic, fantastic movie. But they found a way to turn it with Linda Lavin and Vic Tybeck to turn it into this comedy. And it was a perfect fit. And that was a big role for me. Doing Alice was, and it blew my mind. I had what you call a satori. If you've taken literature in college, you will know what a satori is. That is when the veil is removed from your mind and you see something that was there hiding in plain sight forever. That was the first television comedy job I got in Los Angeles. Mindy Marin was the casting director. She called me up at home and said, "Stephen, we've lost our caveman Carl." And caveman Carl was, if you remember, the crazy FM DJ Wolfman Jack.
Ah, okay.
So Caveman Carl was an FM DJ, but they wanted someone a la Wolfman Jack, who I was familiar from watching him on TV all the time. So she said, "We lost our Caveman Carl. We shoot today in front of a live audience. Can you come in, read with Beth Howland, and the director and producer will watch, and if you get the thumbs up from them, you'll go right into hair and makeup and shoot the show. Can you do that? And I said, sure, Mindy, I'll be there. And this was before the age of computers, so I had to go get the script, and I had to learn the part as best I could in a couple of hours. I went over, I think we were over at, was it CBS Radford? I can't remember if it was CBS Radford or Warner Brothers. I think it was Warner Brothers. Went over and read with Beth Howland, got the part, went on. That was my first TV sitcom job. And this last year, before the pandemic, I did one of my last shows on the Goldberg spinoff, Schooled, right? And I play, I'm Principal Ball on the Goldbergs. Now, see, that violates my rule.
I was just thinking that.
But I'm Principal Ball. But they do call me Earl Ball on the show. But in Schooled, I've been promoted to the Board of Education. So anyway, I was doing my last Schooled that ended up being shot. And a father came up to me and he said, my son, Justin, it's his first job. And he's scared to death. Now, Justin didn't have any lines, but he had to high five one of the leads of the show in a scene. And he was sweet kid. Father said, can you give any advice to Justin about show business? And I was like, oh, I'm going to give him the advice that they gave me, always, don't get discouraged and keep trying, the mantra that was given to me when I came to Los Angeles is get a job, get an agent, get a good job, get a good agent. That's the mantra. And they said the important thing is you get the job first, then you get the agent. If you expect the agent to get you work, you're never going to succeed. You get the work, that draws the agent to you. They say, this guy gets his own work, I want to be a part of his team. So I was going to give him that advice. And then I thought of the story I told you about Caveman Carl. And it dawned on me. There came the Satori. The curtain parted from my head. I go, wait a minute. Mindy Marin never called me in to audition for this part when she was auditioning for this part. I had done maybe 5 or 6 auditions for Mindy before this. Each audition was a failure. None of the auditions led to a second audition or a callback. She called me in. There wasn't even a pat on the back, attaboy, good try, we'll see. Nothing. I'd come in, read for a part, go home, hear nothing. But on this particular day, Mindy Marin called me and said, Stephen, can you come in? We lost our Caveman Carl. Can you do this? And it dawned on me. It was my failures with Mindy that had made an impression. Now, as an actor, every time I had an audition and didn't get called back, I beat myself up about it and thought, this is a disaster. I'm never going to make it in this town. This, it killed my heart. But it was my failures that led to Mindy Marin calling me in. And I said to Justin, I said, don't beat yourself up over this job, over what they do to you in this town, because imagine a world in which your failures aren't your failures, but your failures can actually lead you somewhere. That world looks completely different. And it changed the way I viewed my life, changed the way I viewed working in this business.
Yeah, that is so well said. And it speaks volumes about what type of person Mindy Marin really was or is. It really speaks volumes about she never forgot you. I mean, that's such a powerful way of looking. I mean, I can't think of a better piece of advice that you could give to someone. Talk about the 2 generations thing coming back into play again, Stephen. Not saying that you're a grandfather, but that kid will take that advice and he will go with that.
I am a grandfather, by the way. 5 months a grandfather.
Congratulations.
Thank you, and I love the hell out of it. Oh, God, if they, as we have said, it is such an insult for an actor, not only to get a part with no name, but if the part is just Gramps. I remember I got an audition for Gramps like about 12 years ago, and I was wounded to the core. Not only did I not have a name, I was just that thing called a Gramps. And I said, listen, I am a still vital man. I still kick a whole lot of butte. You can't just say I'm Gramps. Well, sorry, Stephen, you don't have to go in on it. But now I realize, oh, God, what a blessing. It's the two generations. You see in little baby Dior's face, who's 5 months yesterday, when she looks at me and smiles, and my heart melts, and it's all love and no responsibility. I'm able to do whatever I want with that baby. When that baby cries, I just call up my son and said, take her away. We're done. We're done here. It's fantastic. It is such a blessing. But again, like the two generations, it's blessings that we don't know we're in store for.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And before I get off of Alice, and I wanted to just touch on a few of your films here. People forget, Stephen, and they don't realize, because now we're in and this is a good thing that we're in a Netflix age, we're in this streaming age. People forget how powerful those three networks were in 1985, right? So to be on Alice was a big deal. I mean, that isn't just like, oh, you're on this random show on Netflix that people may or may not have streamed. Alice was on for the world to see. People don't realize that. I feel like that in 2020. I feel like that's something that's kind of, some people remember it, I'm sure, but I feel like it's a forgotten kind of, I mean, that's a big thing to be on one of those three networks, Stephen.
Oh, man. Say it again, write it in stone. That world is gone. And if you think about One Day at a Time, when Norman Lear first did One Day at a Time, when I came out to Los Angeles, that was the first show I saw as an audience member, because a girl from Oak Cliff was a recurring part on One Day at a Time. And so when I came out from Dallas, I got to watch One Day at a Time as a studio audience member. Kay Callan took me backstage. I got to meet Bonnie Franklin and, Richard Mazer, got to meet Norman Lear. It was amazing. But One Day at a Time, in those days, I mean, how many millions and millions and millions of viewers did it get? I know that when All in the Family was on, they get something like 50 million viewers.
Insane. It was insane.
Insane. That does not happen anymore. Now, if you get like 5 million, 6 million, 8 million, you're kicking butt. But imagine a world in which a network has that platform to say what those Norman Lear shows could say, and have 50 million households be watching it. That's crazy numbers. Yeah.
And you just threw something else in that's I feel like that's been lost, and that's a live audience versus like a laugh track, or that's something that's been lost, I feel like, over the years as well, Stephen. I mean, I don't know.
And again, here's the lesson of two generations that's so mind-blowing. Meg Mallon was, I believe she was our switcher on one show. I think it was Mr. Rhodes, maybe I did. The switcher is a very important role when you're doing a sitcom, because there are 4 cameras, and she's the one who's calling which camera we want, which one is going to go into the feed that the people are going to see. You usually have one camera that's a wide shot. You have a couple 2 shots. You have a close-up. And the switcher's the one go camera 2, camera 3, camera 5, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so always on the shows I never really have the leading role because I'm a character actor. So I have time to talk to Meg. And I asked her how she began, and she began way back when. I think she began on I Love Lucy. And not as a switcher, but just someone working in television. And I think it's true. I do it with a grain of salt because now the whole world has changed with COVID and the way things are filmed. But when you have live audience shows now, they record the audience's laughter, but they add and subtract from the laughter in editing. And one thing Desi Arnaz, who is the inventor of the sitcom, It was Desi Arnaz who came up with the idea of having 3 cameras, film a live show, a live little play in front of a studio audience. It was his genius. Meg Mound was saying they still have the laughter recorded from the early I Love Lucy shows. And as a tribute to 2 generations, as a tribute to Desi Arnaz, Ricky Ricardo, as a tribute, the laughter from the I Love Lucy show is used to sweeten the laughter of all of the network comedies that you see, because the laughter was recorded so perfectly and so warmly that it warms up all the digital laugh tracks that exist nowadays.
How about that?
So there's a bit of I Love Lucy in the shows.
Wow. Well, that's fantastic. And we talk about, I'm still trying to get over that last. I mean, that's talk about a legacy. We're looking at speaking of legacy, one of the movies I did want to ask you about was obviously Groundhog Day, epic character in Ned Ryerson. I've had the composer from the movie on the show, George Fenton. I've had Peggy Roeder, who plays a piano teacher. They spoke about this movie, this set, this environment, like it was the best they've ever had. And I'm not talking about like just on camera. I'm talking about off camera. They spoke I don't think I've had 2 people speak so fondly about a movie. What is it about this movie that makes it so special? What is it?
Well, my theory has evolved over the years. The first answer is a technical answer, is that it became guerrilla filmmaking. And when you work quickly, sometimes you make a lot of mistakes, but there's nothing more brilliant than having to work on the fly. You don't have time to pull up old tricks or old ideas. And, Bill and I started shooting our scene in the street. There were 9 of them originally in the script, I believe. The first day I was there, we were first shot up like 6:30 in the morning was my call, which was a nightmare. And meeting Bill Murray for the first time, terrifying. And Harold Ramis wanting to introduce us. It was amazing. We got to the end of that first week, and Harold Ramis shot this huge set piece. It was like 2.5 days of shooting, where Bill realizes that he has no consequences. And in the script, in the scene, he takes a chain, he spray paints his room at the end. In this wild montage, he gets out a chainsaw, chainsaws the wall, chainsaws the furniture in 2, goes into the bathroom, cuts a mohawk into his hair. This wild, crazy montage. And in the morning, it's all the same. Now, it took, as I say, like a couple days to film. And if you know anything about filmmaking, anything you paint, you have to unpaint, because you have to shoot it again from a different angle. Any furniture you cut in half, you have to restore or have doubles. And Bill getting the toupee of him having a mohawk, he had that made in New York from the same guy who made my toupee on Broadway, and those toupees cost about $10,000 each.
Wow.
So you figure the first week of filming is when the studio is looking over Harold Ramis's shoulder to say, what are you giving me? What are we getting for our money? So they see Ned Ryerson. First day, they see me and Bill, and they go like, okay, that's working. That's kind of fun. Then you have this big set piece at the end of the week. Harold Ramis took the film, threw it away after shooting. And I'm going like, what the hell? And Harold talked to Danny Rubin, who is this brilliant screenwriter for Groundhog Day. And he said, what is the story we're really telling? Are we telling the story of Bill Murray with no consequences, which we see in a lot of movies? Or are we telling the story of man and what is our purpose in life? How are we finding our purpose? And Harold Ramis, who was a practicing Buddhist, was saying like, what the Buddhists believe is that it takes 10,000 years for a soul to be perfected. And that could be the story we are telling here with this movie. So Harold Ramis threw away that scene that took, I don't know how much money to shoot, to do. What kind of courage, what kind of chutzpah does it take to do that? And he replaced it with the scene with Bill Murray up in bed taking notes as to what he was going to do. Then Bill gets this idea, breaks the pencil that was behind his ear in two, puts half the pencil on the bedside table, half on top of the clock radio. In the morning, we hear Sonny and Cher, lights on. Bill wakes up, the pencil is whole. When I saw that with the full audience, the audience gasped. They gasped. It was movie magic. And from that point, from the point that Harold Ramis threw that scene away, all of us on the set were getting new pages constantly. And if you know anything about acting, you know, first you get the pink pages, then you get first you get the blue, then you get the pink, then you get the green, then you get the chartreuse, then you get the orange. We were getting pages deep into the green, deep into the chartreuse, deep into the orange, rewrites for the whole rest of the script. And we became guerrilla filmmakers. We were shooting on the fly. Bill and I no longer had a schedule. We were on will notifies, which in the script means like you don't get a day off. When they call your number, you have to go down to the street to shoot those street scenes, however they come out, whenever they come out, in whatever weather condition it is. And so when you're not really like an actor on location anymore where, oh, it's my day off. Let's watch football and get drunk. No, let's hang out with happy hour and eat, hot dogs on sticks. No, we were always working and we never knew what we were going to get. And that made it guerrilla filmmaking. We were always on edge. And boy, I just thought of something else. I just thought of my teacher, my acting teacher, who used to say something to me and I couldn't believe it. And he used to say, comfort is the enemy of the artist. And wow. I used to think, what a pile of crap is that? No. What you do is you get a few good jobs and you get a nice home in the hills. You get someone to clean up for you. Comfort is the goal of the artist. No. Groundhog Day was the proof of it. Comfort is the enemy of the artist. No one on that set was comfortable. And when the people you talk saying like, well, it was the best set I was ever on, I could say maybe it was. But not for the comfortability of it. Right. Because it was cold and it was brutal. But in terms of the work getting done and the camera work getting done, it was magnificent. Harold Ramis was a brilliant commander, and Bill was terrific as the leading actor of that film. And of course, Andy was gorgeous and magnificent. It just, all the pieces came together, but I think it came together because everybody had to fight for their lives.
Yeah, and Bill's name is routinely brought up by those, especially by Peggy, who played the piano teacher, about how really wonderful he was and is. To be on call like that, to be like almost like a doctor, Stephen. Well, how long was it like that for? Was it for months? Was it for weeks? Where you can't, like you just said, you can't get comfortable. You can't, have a few beers. You can't do. How long are you living like that for? How long are you on call like that for?
Well, the easy answer is, as Ned Ryerson, I think I shot for 3 weeks, maybe a little more in a row. Then I went home, and I get a call from Trevor Albert, our executive producer, and goes, Stephen, you're not going to believe this, but we want a little more Ned in the movie. He says, you got to come back out. We're putting more Ned scenes in. And so I flew out, and there were no Ned scenes in the movie, but if you look at Danny's script is so brilliant. I bring this up just in terms of script analysis. So we know Groundhog Day is the repeated day over and over and over again. But what a lot of people miss is that within the structure of the repeated day, at the beginning of the movie, you have the morning repeated, and Bill meets me on the street in the morning. So every morning you see Ned. Then in the middle of the film, the middle part of the day is repeated, and that is where Bill is at the diner. And that's when it comes to Chris Elliott coming in, the fateful words, "We better get on the road, keep ahead of the weather." And then the end of the day is repeated near the end of the movie, with the evening and the slave auction and the snow falling and Bill getting his face slapped endlessly by Andy because he keeps trying to come on to her and it's a failure. So within the repeated day, you have morning, noon, and night repeated, which was really kind of stunning. So Ned is a character of the morning, and they wanted to bring him back to be a character of the night as well. So I came back, and there was no scene. There was nothing. They had the veteran of foreign war that hall rented for a week, and that's where they were doing the slave auction, where Bill plays the piano and all the delightful scenes of the slave auction and all. But they had no scene with Ned. So I'm sitting in my trailer day 1, day 2, day 3, and I'm asking Harold Ramis, I said, "Is there anything for me to?" "Oh, no, we'll come up with some. We'll come up with some lines. We'll come up with something for you." And I start getting paranoid, like as an actor. So here's a bit of trivia for you. I wrote a scene in my trailer of where I run in, I meet Bill, and I say, "It was the greatest day of my life," and I list all these different kinds of insurance he bought. Water damage, death and dismemberment, life insurance, whole life. And I do this whole list of stuff. It was the greatest day of my life. I wrote that scene. We had about 2 hours left in the Veterans of Foreign War Hall. And Harold Ramis said, "Guys, do you want to just make something up?" And I said, "Well, I wrote this scene." And I showed it to Harold, and he read it. He goes like, "Oh, let's do this scene." And he showed it to Bill. Bill looked at it and goes like, yeah, we could do this scene." And so without writing credit, I did write a scene that ended up in Groundhog Day, and that is the scene where I come in at the very end and do the list of insurance things and where are we going to eat, we're going out together. Oh, I got that. So I did write that scene that ended up in Groundhog Day, and Bill improvised in that too. He improvised a couple good jokes. We had 2 hours to do it. Bill said, "Let's shoot it and be done with it." And we had one and done, and that's what we did. That we got it done, and that's ended up in the movie.
Wow, how impressive is that? I mean, and I've heard you talk about in other interviews how really professional and phenomenal Bill Murray is. One thing I was looking at this movie, IMDb is, it collects the scores and every movie gets a number and so forth. Why is it, I'm asking you this as a movie fan and somebody that's in the industry, Stephen, why are comedies always hovering in the 6s and 7s? Groundhog Day is a little bit of a rarity. It's got an 8+ with almost 700. Why are like Spaceballs is like a 7.1, and these are movies that we quote every day. Like we quote these comedies that get 6s and 7s every day of our lives. They are a permanent part of pop culture, but yet they are so disrespected on IMDb. Help me understand this, Stephen.
Amen, brother. Amen. I'm in your corner. It's amazing. It is so rare for an actor in a comedy. Like, there's no reason why Bill Murray should not have been nominated or have won Best Actor for Groundhog Day. It is not easy to do comedy. It is much more difficult to do comedy than to be what we call straight drama or whatever. But yes, comedy is always dissed. I'm not sure why. Maybe because of the nature of comedy, it doesn't take itself so seriously, whereas dramas, damn it, they do take themselves so seriously. And if the drama is good, we believe them. we take them seriously too. I got a call from the BBC around this time of year when people call about Groundhog Day. And they said, we're doing a list of the 50 greatest comedies of all time. And Groundhog Day, we're putting as, Groundhog Day, we're putting has made the top 50. And I go, made the top 50? What are the other 49? Oh, wait, don't tell me. Monty Python films. And we started laughing. Well, yes, there are 4 Monty Python films in the top 10. I go like, home field advantage. Groundhog Day is a film which has endured the test of time.
No question.
There are great dramas like The Killing Fields. Give me a break. It's a great movie. It's splendid filmmaking. It's riveting. It's heartbreaking. The performances. Hang Nor is brilliant. Sam Waterston's brilliant, but I got to tell you, we go back to Groundhog Day again and again and again because sometimes we like our message with a smile. Sometimes we take our medicine with a little bit of sugar and it goes down better. And so don't ask me why it's always dissed. But, I take a look at our show one day at a time. It was unique. They don't come around like that so often where a show can crack you up with laughter and then the next second break your heart. Very few shows can do that. And I guess we live in a day and a time where that isn't fully appreciated, but that's the way it goes. I don't know. I have no answer for you except I'm in your corner. Comedies, respect.
Yeah, and talk about a comedy. You mentioned One Day at a Time. One Day at a Time had, I want to say it was like an 8.2 or 8.3, which is unbelievable for a comedy in itself. Truly a wonderful, wonderful show. I just don't understand some of the things that go on as we look at this. And we talk about sense of humor. We talk about comedy. All that people need to know about comedy is that when The Martian was up for the Golden Globes, they put it in the comedy category. That's all I needed to know about people not understanding what comedy is, what a sense of humor is, because Matt Damon facing impending death is certainly hilarious. Millions of miles away from home. The people just don't understand comedy, Stephen. They don't get it at all.
There is a book on comedic theory that I have Henri Bergson. I think I have his name right. Henri Bergson. He wrote this theory on comedy, and he said a big difference of comedy and not comedy is you cannot do a Shakespeare monologue like from Hamlet sitting down. You can't do, that this too solid flesh should melt, thaw, resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed its canon against self-slaughter. Oh, God, that it should come to this. You got to stand up for that. You have to stand up. He says, comedy is the idea that we can look at death and survive. That it is the ability to survive beyond the grave in a way. And certainly that is something that's true with Groundhog Day. I could see how that movie will last for generations. One reason being that it was shot in the winter, and so everybody's just wearing sweaters, scarves, and heavy coats, and there's no style difference to go like, man, people looked weird back then. But it is looking death in the face and surviving instead of embracing death. And that is what makes comedy so magnificent.
Well said. And for those listening, Stephen has worked for some amazing directors, Mel Brooks in Spaceballs, Christopher Nolan in Momento, Harold Ramis, we've been talking about, the late Alan Parker, who we lost in July, Michael Mann, who was up for Good Will Hunting at one point, and he wanted to make the friends car thieves, which is of course Michael Mann's style. Is there one? He could take the movie The Notebook and turn it into a car thief. He is just such. But I'm going to tell you, you always know when you're watching a Michael Mann movie, it has such a beauty to it. These are all top-notch directors. I hate to ask this question, but is there one that stands out for you, or are they all part of this collective, wonderful experience that you've been through?
Well, one thing when you work with the really great directors like a Ridley Scott, like there is something as an actor that you walk away with, that you learn from those great directors. I learned a lot from Harold Ramis. The big lesson I learned from Harold Ramis, simple lesson, is that comedy lives in the two-shot. And I go, excuse me. He says, yeah. People still try to film comedy in close-up, in singles. But where it lives is you have to have the two forces on screen at the same time. You have to have the world, and you have to have the force that's aberrant in conflict with the world. For example, he says, if you take a look at the beginning of Groundhog Day, Andy McDowell is the world, and Bill Murray is the force, the aberrant force in the world, until Bill meets me. Bill then becomes the world. He becomes the normal guy, and Ned is the aberrant force in the world. And that's why Harold Ramis always would shoot those scenes as two shots, because he said for comedy to really work, you have to see the world and the aberrant force in the same frame. And as Groundhog Day moves deeper into the more dramatic moments of it is when they start cutting into singles, close-ups of Andy and Bill. You learn from Alan Parker. Oh, God. Alan Parker was like a mentor to me. He was magnificent. And the gifts he gave me as a director, I would never be able to repay. Brilliant and generous. Ridley Scott, brilliant and again generous. He on Thelma and Louise, his quest, what he loved, he wanted to do every role on the crew while we were shooting the film. So Ridley would like set up a camera shot, whatever, but then one morning he'd be carrying cable. One morning he was setting up snacks, craft service. He would do every job on the set as a hoot, as a bit of joy. And when you work with those great directors, there is so much joy that flows through the project, even on a project as horrific as Mississippi Burning, as brutal as that film was, with as hard-hitting as it was, there was such life flowing through that movie every day because of Alan Parker. And, of course, you have Gene Hackman, you have Willem Dafoe. My God, what a cast. You have Franny, such great actors in that movie. But so much of it came from the permissions you get from the director when you work with a really great director like that. I'll never forget him.
Yeah, and I Ridley Scott, who is still kicking butt today. I want to say he's 80, and he's still pumping out these epic, television and shows and movies. Two final questions for you. You've been so kind to give me all this time. I have to say, we talk about criminally underrated. Let's throw Wild Hogs into that category. When my wife and I, when we're down or we want to that movie never lets us down, ever. And then you talk about, we've been having a few themes here. We talked about the generations. We've talked about what a comedy is. What is there not to like about this film? You're fantastic in it. We love it. We never not laugh. And I think we've seen it 200 times, Stephen.
And there's another example of guerrilla filmmaking that people may not know behind the curtains. What happened on Wild Hogs was they had a script, and they got the guys. They got John and they got Tim. They got Bill. They got all. They got the great cast together before they had a finished script, and so we had to start shooting before we really had a finished product on the page. And Tim Allen, brilliant. I have seen different kinds of brilliance enacted in different ways in films. Tim Allen stitched so much of the film together with improv in the moment. Hilarious things that he came up with, things that he wove scenes together in the moment on film because they had to start shooting before they had a finished script. And Tim brought so much genius, comedic and, in a way, what became structural genius to the product. Martin Lawrence, phenomenal. John Travolta. John, a very special person.
For sure.
We were shooting in, I know, Madras, New Mexico. It was like 118, and there were fans outside screaming for John. And I was talking to John about Saturday Night Fever and asking him some questions about that, just about his career, because I find him like an amazing actor that's been able to come back from being knocked down so many times because he's so damn good. And he went out there in the heat, jumped on his motorcycle, and sang songs from Grease for his fans.
Wow.
While they were setting up shots. Walt Becker, the director on that film, we were shooting the scene where they slapped the bull on the butt, right? They slapped the bull, and they had like 4 bulls. They had I think Zorro was the easiest. Zorro wouldn't. You could hit Zorro on the head with a baseball bat, and Zorro wouldn't move, and there's nothing. So Zorro was the bull that they used for the guys, for our real actors to slap, our A-team, Martin and Bill Macy, to slap the bull. Then they had another bull that if you hit the bull, it would turn its head and look like, what the hell was that? That was bull number 2. And that could have been Zorro. Bull number 3 was a killer. Bull number 3 was a serious bull. Bull number 3 would attack, but would run in a straight line and would attack. But bull number 4 was a fire-breathing, ferocious, monstrous bull. He was a man killer. So we shot all the scenes with the primary cast, and then they got the stunt guys in there, and they put in bull number 3 and bull number 4. And one of the stuntmen got gored, got thrown out of the ring.
Jeez.
Another got his stepped on by the bull. I forget if it was 3 or 4, stepped on him, broke a bone in his arm. Anyway, we kind of got the shot, but we still had the bulls. We still had daylight. We still had time. And the stuntmen wanted to do it again. And Walt Becker, bless his heart, said, no. I think I'm not going to flirt with catastrophe and with people's safety or lives anymore with what I've seen. I want to be on the side of the angels for this one. And so even though we had probably another hour and a half or 2 hours of light to shoot with, and we had the crew, everybody was ready, Walt realized it was an unsafe situation. And I can't tell you what a rarity that is in my life. If there's light, you're going to shoot. And if it's raining, if it's hailing, whatever, if you can't see, too bad. Hopefully no one will get killed. But that film was very special in terms of all of those people, all those great people. Everybody in that cast was so lovely, Just love seeing him.
See, and I think, you must get that a lot, right? Because this movie, I feel like it's a question you get often, that this is a wonderful movie that's criminally, underrated. We talked about Alice earlier. I think this is one of those movies that would make for a fantastic TV series, right? You focus in on these four guys. You have the sheriff. I don't know. Maybe I'm letting my fandom get ahead of me here, but I don't know. I think it would make for a wonderful television series.
I think, you have to decide if you're going to make it that they're weekend bikers or if they're going on a trip across the country. If they're going on a trip across the country, I could see how it could be a sort of one of those series where a different thing happens in each town, and you could have a few recurring characters, like maybe they're running away from a rival gang or something like that, so you keep having somebody encountering them along the way. You would have to come up with the racetrack, the ground plan on how that could work. But certainly the characters were endearing, and it still makes me laugh when I think of some of the things I saw Tim do. And the guy is like a scholar on American history. You're in the makeup chair, and he's talking about these things that happened in 1783, and then there was this. It's just crazy. He's an amazing person, Tim Allen. I understand his success. He's an amazing man.
Yeah, and people would kick me if I didn't mention, your fantastic work in Spaceballs. My very last question for you, Stephen, is this. So Saturday I was at the movie theater. I was watching Tom Hanks in News of the World. Phenomenal movie. We've talked about the virus a little bit. It definitely has affected everybody in the industry in some form, I would believe. Can we save movie theaters? Like, don't get me wrong, I love Netflix. I love streaming. I love the living room. But I also realize that there's a better home for some projects. I just think it's on everybody to not, and it's easy for me to say, but on everybody to not let movie theaters die or go away, because they have been such a critical part of this industry for easily 100 years plus. We cannot let this movie theaters fail. We absolutely cannot. Am I being over the top with that, Stephen?
I don't think you're being over the top, but I think the world's going to look completely different depending on how we come out of this virus. The question isn't will we be able to film again? Because I just finished filming 3 Goldbergs. The last 3 weeks. They're filming stuff again. What's going to bring you to the movie theater? What are you going to risk your life for to see? The virus has to get really knocked in the head. Now, my son, William, works at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. He just got the vaccine last week, which he said he had absolutely no problem with, by the way.
Good.
But he said it's probably not going to be till the end of spring, beginning of summer, if enough people get vaccinated, that it will really curb the spread of the virus. And it'll make it a much more normal, handleable situation. I don't know what our world's going to look like after that. Would you go to a little Italian restaurant to have spaghetti now?
I would not.
You wouldn't take the risk? Would you
not
take the risk to go see Mamma Mia 3? Would you take the risk to do that? Probably not. That's the question. And I look back, the symphony, the opera. I wasn't a fan of the opera, but I had a podcast fan, a Tobolowsky Files fan that was with the opera. She comes to Los Angeles every now and then, invites Ann and I to see her. And, I've come to love the opera. Are you going to go see Aida? It'd sit there with a couple thousand people? Unless the world looks different than it does now, you're just not going to do it. So, I'm with you. I think movies have to be saved. But remember, when I came out to Los Angeles in 1976, what we had we still had movie theaters.
Right.
We had the State, we had the $1 Million, we had all these theaters downtown with the velvet curtains that sat like 2,000 people. And then that became the Cracker Box Theater and the mall theaters where you have Apocalypse Now playing at 5 different 100-seat theaters instead of one 1,000-seat theater. So we've been through changes before, and there may be changes again. So we'll have to see. But I'm with you, man. Like, movies are my life. I love them, and I grew up in the movies. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to say it's taking me this long. Your podcast is phenomenal. I just started listening a week ago. The Tobolowsky Files, for those listening. What a wonderful podcast. And I have to say, what a wonderful human being and guest you have been, Stephen. And I have to say, Homeless Guy 2 has done pretty well for himself.
I tell you, it's kept me from being homeless guy number 1. That's for sure.
I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast. So you are honestly one of the most fun people I've ever had a chance to talk to. It's just been so much fun, Stephen.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me, and it was a pleasure.
They say we're young and we don't know. We won't find out until we grow. Well, I don't know if all that's true, 'cause you got me and baby, I got you. Hey, I got you, babe. I got you, babe. They say our love won't pay the rent before it's earned. Our money's all been spent. I guess that's so we don't have a plot, but at least I'm sure of all the things we got. Babe, I got you, babe. I got you, babe. I got flowers in the spring. I got you to wear my ring. And when I'm sad, you're a clown. And if I get scared, you're always around. Don't let them say your hair's too long. Then put your little hand in mine. There ain't no hill or mountain we can't climb. Babe, I got you, babe. I got you, babe. I got you to hold my hand. I got you to understand. I got you to walk with me